We are going to now talk about sustainable drainage, and we're going to talk about the future of drainage, policy versus pragmatism. My name's Antony Oliver. I'm a journalist who's been running about infrastructure for probably nearly 25 years or so, and it's quite interesting because quite a lot of the discussions around sustainable drainage, they're pretty much the same as they were 2 decades ago, which is, I suppose, good and bad. We're going to get stuck into some of these issues, and we've got a fantastic panel who I'm going to introduce in a few moments' time as we chew over these big issues which, as Brittany has pointed out, really stem from the fact that climate change is changing the way our world, we're living in our world. But there are huge challenges facing infrastructure professionals, but also huge opportunities, and hopefully we'll talk about those right now, particularly around the way that we manage and the way that we value water in our society. So let me introduce the panel. Brittany, you've just met, graduate engineer with BuroHappold, but she forgot to mention she's actually ICE's superhero for water. I mean, you know, yes, she's a real-life superhero for water. So welcome, Water Woman. We've also got Ian Titherington. Ian has come down from Cardiff Council, who is lead engineer for drainage, 27 years in local government. He knows a thing or two about drains. We've also got Martin Lambley, right over on the other side, from Foul Utilities and Water Management at Wavin. Big stand over there, and they're supporting the ICE here today with their activities as part of this focus on flood management. And then finally, Sue Illman from Illman Young Landscape Design, and also is the CIC's champion for flood mitigation and resilience, co-author of the Syria's recent SUDS construction manual, which you've all read. Yes? Excellent. And she's going to be talking, hopefully, in really usual controversial terms about what's going to happen in the world of SUDS. Very interesting that you mentioned, Brittany, around about the fact that the next generation has got a real focus on the way that we manage and value water. Although my 13-year-old daughter seems to spend an inordinate amount of time in the shower. Maybe that's part of the solution. I don't know. But anyway, Bethany, just kick us off. You are ICE's Wonder Woman. Superhero for water. Are we making progress towards embracing, I suppose, water as a valuable resource? Are we being pragmatic enough in our approach?
It's a good question, and I think in reality, no, we're not valuing water enough yet. And I think the utility companies are trying to drive this forward a lot more by introducing new tariffs, which might be coming through in the future, but also they understand that resilience is a real challenge. Particularly Wessex Water have recently introduced a new trunk main purely focused on buffering their system so that if they have drought in one region in the southwest, they can actually move that water down. And that's because they actually acknowledge the value that water has and the demand that people will place on it when it does disappear. But I think the problem we face in this country really is that water is so readily available and it is so cheap that it's really difficult to really understand the value that is placed on that. I spent a long time working in Peru and Kenya, where they don't have access to water at all, these communities, and they were walking miles to get to a stream that was dry for most of the year, and they were having to battle off elephants, which was a really bizarre thing for me to come across because it's not something you think about. But they really value water and they understand how important it is, and I think in this country maybe we've got a little way to go before we understand that.
Well, we've seen this week outrage in Balham that the water has gone off for 24 hours. I mean, do we need more water cut-offs? You know, do we need more people to be without water on a more regular basis to get them to value it?
You know what, it would work. I'm not sure the government would ever back that.
It's a policy decision.
Yeah, I mean, you see it when we lose electricity, everyone suddenly goes, oh God, the grid. Yeah, actually cutting people off for a little while would help them to understand, but I'm not going to back that publicly.
Well, Ian, you've come down from Cardiff. Wales has got loads of water, hasn't it? Loads of water. 27 years you've been working on this. I mean, are we now getting closer to making sustainable drainage systems a mainstream solution? I know Wales has really embraced it. You know, what have we learned over the last 20 years or so?
I think it's working. I think we've learned not enough. I think we've ignored the sustainable drainage issue. I think it's a generational thing. I've spent many years of my life trying to persuade people to go down a more sustainable drainage option. And I think there's a generation of engineers above me who just won't accept it. And it's almost been a case of me waiting for them to retire to bring a new generation of engineers into the industry to try and win them over. Because I think younger generation are people who've grown up with the recycling as not an option, as a necessity. They never lived in a generation where we used to throw things in a black bin. I think they accept the drainage argument of sustainable drainage, but I really have struggled as an engineer with a generation of people who think that burying it is always the option and alternatives are not. I think slowly, possibly through legislation, I think through finding designs and constructions that people could go and see and work and understand the maintenance issues, because maintenance is the thing that is always used to kill off sustainable drainage. To say, oh, that looks pretty, it's got trees, but how are you going to maintain it? That's the issue in terms of adoption and maintenance. It's always used as an excuse not to go down the best design route.
But in fair, Ian, that's been the barrier for the last 25 years. I mean, are the barriers changing, or is it just simply the same one?
I think the maintenance issue is changing radically. I think the new SUDS manual, the new construction information on sustainable drainage is turning people's heads on maintenance. I think, the argument is being one on maintenance. I think the argument's being one on design. The adoption issue, still a massive, massive problem for sustainable drainage in the UK. What we're trying to do in Cardiff is to go around the standard options of having a commuted sum. The big problem we got in the council is we do a big housing development, say 2,000 houses, pick a number out of the air, not thinking of any particular development, and they want you to put a commuted sum for the drainage at the beginning of the scheme. Beginning of the scheme, there's no drainage design. So how can I come up with a figure to maintain something for 25 years when there's no design to put the figure to? At the end of the project, when I got the design, the developer's got no money to give you for a commuted sum. So it doesn't work. So you have to come up with alternative models of adoption to make these systems work. You can win the argument on maintenance, win the argument on design, make the argument on quality. The adoption is still the last stumbling block that people use not to go down the best design route, and I think it is the best design route.
Well, Sue, I mean, how do you see the current situation? I mean, Gordon, you were involved in the recent SIWEM big SUDS survey, and you came out with the conclusion that a vast majority of respondents involved in SUDS delivery consider SUDS policy ineffective. I mean, is that the crux of the issue, that the policy surrounding the use of sustainable drainage is wrong? What for you is holding back this embracing of a new way of managing water?
I think the issue is quite diverse now, because although we've got SUDS enshrined within mainstream policy from government, there are too many letouts, and the way that policy is then implemented through the planning system enables that to happen. So the presumption in favour of sustainable development, and you've got to have SUDS unless it can be proved to be inappropriate, with absolutely no definition of what inappropriate may be. So although we've got good policy in a lot of local authorities, with core strategies and local plans and SPDs, so there's ways of trying to ensure from the grassroots level that we can get good SUDS delivery. Ultimately, if SUDS is the one sticking point on a site that's probably in something like flood zone 1, rather than an area that's particularly vulnerable to flooding, if the arguments are put forward and the council is going to take that on the basis of a balanced view, then the sort of SUDS that we get, then that's probably not going to happen. Or SUDS on the surface. Of course everybody has to manage their water. I don't think there's any doubt that in development everybody has to manage their water properly. The question is, are they going to use sustainable drainage systems? And for me, the sustainable drainage system is not a swale and a bomb crater, or indeed something that has pretty much no element on the surface, unless of course there are times when that may not be possible, but they really are pretty few and far between. So there has to be the will to want to do it, and I think there's been so much negativity around SUDS that it's been off-putting to people who've sort of read something negative about it. If you're a small-scale developer, you don't actually really understand what it's all about, and you're not going to go down the route because it's not what's business as usual.
But it sounds like you're more erring towards policy than pragmatism. You're more erring towards regulation rather than urging people to change behaviour.
No, I do want them to change behaviour, absolutely, and I spend my whole life going around talking to people about integrated design and the value of it.
But I feel there's a but coming.
Yeah, because what I want to do is to sell them the multiple benefits that it can achieve. You know, actually, only last week I was talking to a group up in Shropshire and explaining how, when we design, actually for us to get clients to engage with sustainable drainage is an absolutely easy thing to do. Because if we're looking at new development, I can say, you know, with the team, we're going to look at heritage issues, we're going to look at visual amenity issues, we're going to look at landscape character, we're going to look at biodiversity and your ecosystems, your amenity space requirements, your drainage, your flooding, and we can put that all into one package, which is the external works and how you've designed your scheme. So you're going to deliver all of these policy things in one go, and actually for the same budget. That's the point. Well, what's not to like about that? And my hand gets bitten off quite regularly.
Martin, from the point of view of the manufacturing supply chain, does it matter to you what happens? I mean, you've got pipes you can put in the ground. You've got all sorts of solutions. I mean, are you doing enough from the manufacturer's point of view? What has to change to create a more sustainable drainage future?
I think the acceptance of new ideas and innovation needs to become more prevalent. Ian just mentioned it there, the generation of engineers that are very fixed in what product they will accept or what drainage system they will accept. And traditional drainage using pipe systems, so obviously it's very easy for us from supply chain. It's linear product, it's a range of fittings and connections, everything flows from one pipe to the other, excuse the pun. But with sustainable drainage, it's more bespoke per site, so there's less off-the-shelf solutions, which is difficult from a supply chain to manage. But ultimately, it's about acceptance and people being willing to take, not necessarily a risk, but take up a new idea and a new innovation.
But from your perspective, though, regulation policy is good, isn't it?
To a degree, but I think within that there needs to be room for innovation.
But you know where you stand, though. As a manufacturer, you know where you stand, you know what you've got to deliver.
You do, but there still needs to be room for innovation within it. So if you take Sewers for Adoption 7, it wasn't particularly, it didn't allow for a lot of innovation within the drainage chain. If you look at something like specification for highway works, again, it's very prescriptive in what needs to be done, and it just doesn't give people the room to say, well, here's an interesting new idea from manufacturer A, B, C, I want to try that. It's a very protracted process to get it through, and let's be honest, it's normally driven by finance, and is that solution going to be cheaper for me to install, maintain going forwards, or actually more about, is that solution cheaper for me to buy now rather than looking at the whole life cost of it.
Well, Ian, I mean, in Wales, you have Schedule. You've implemented Schedule 3 of the Act. Yeah. You have embraced policy. You have embraced the rules to make the market act in a certain behaviour. Yeah. Why has that made a difference?
Well, if in local government, if something's statutory, they'll pay for it. If it's not statutory, they won't pay for it. The funding cuts are so severe. I've lost, 3/4 of my controllable budget in my department in the last 3 years, including clearing the snow away. So that was quite interesting last weekend. And it has to be statutory to be funded, or otherwise it will not be funded. So bringing Schedule 3 through in Wales is forcing local authorities to take such very seriously. You know, certain managers in my council who've ignored the issue for a decade are suddenly sending me emails saying, "Oh, have you seen what this Schedule 3? What's it going to do?" Well, you're going to find out in about 3 months, mate, because we're bringing it in. And I think it is a carrot and stick in effect. Unless it's statutory, they won't fund it. Now it's statutory, they will fund it. And what we've got to do is to make sure they're going down the right route. And I think he's correct in saying about innovation, allowing innovation. I'm doing a retrofit scheme in the central Cardiff at the moment, and I'm doing a presentation on it this afternoon. And my final line is going to give it away now is, look, if I can do it here, you can do it bloody anywhere. No excuses. Look at sustainable drainage. And it's in the city, it's not a suburb, there's no space, And it is challenging because there are no products that can go and pick off the shelf. We've had to engineer existing products to make it work in a sustainable drainage system in the middle of a city centre. It is real civil engineering, and adapting products and systems. And all the feedback I get from doing this project, because no one's quite done it like this way before, I'm going to publish and give to the industry to say, don't do that, do this, to learn from the products we're producing, and hopefully from that, new products from companies will be produced, and there will be innovation to make it easier. Because at the end of the day, legislation matters, but having the ability to take something off the shelf and build it. For example, if I had a load of gullies going off a busy highway, going into a park area, causing a lot of pollution from a highway, what option am I going to choose? Am I going to choose a Class 1 interceptor from a top product producer, or am I going to create a series of spillways and a green rain garden to remove it at the right speed, clean water out the other end, maintained and adopted by the council? I got two options of which way to go. Which one's going to get maintained? I'll tell you which one's going to get maintained. The green one is, because as soon as you put an interceptor in the ground, they're never touched, and within 6 months they're useless because they're never maintained. It's about putting a system in that's designed well, works well, and is easy to maintain. And that's what we've got to do in SUDS to win people over.
But in that relies on the design of that green system to be efficient, to be correct, to be well thought through. And I suppose the problem has always been that there wasn't the knowledge there to do that.
No, there is the knowledge there now. There are the examples in things like the SUD manual, and these things are easy to build. But what people want is, look, I want to put one of these in. I'll have a local authority from South Wales will ring me up and ask me, how do I build it? Who do I talk to? And up until 12 or 18 months ago, I wouldn't be able to tell them. Now I can send them to certain consultants who've built these things in South Wales. I can go to the SUDS manual and say, build that size, And what we should be doing is saying this area of highway needs this size of rain garden with these plants, this type of soil specification with that outlet. Now, if we can do that as an industry, and people can say, right, for that area, I can build that to do that. That's how much it's going to cost to maintain a year. That's who's going to adopt it. That's when things will happen. If they have to sit down and think about it, they won't do it.
Brittany,
the interceptor in.
From a perspective of a young engineer coming into this world, is Ian right? Is it possible for you to embrace these new ideas and get your clients to adopt them?
It's always possible. I think the biggest challenge I've come across quite a lot, and actually something we were talking about with the IC in a round table around, sustainable innovations, is demonstrating the value of these products and really being able to go to the client and say, look, we've done it before, this is how amazing it was, this is the value it really added, and then they see that and they get the idea and they're like, oh yeah, that's great, I'm not just getting a drainage system, I'm getting something that looks beautiful and it makes people happy. And it's about having that post-occupancy evaluation, really being able to install the system, not just install it, but actually monitor it afterwards and be able to go back to your clients later and say, look, this is really what you added by doing this. And I think really for me what needs to happen more now is more monitoring of the systems that we do put in place. So exactly as you just said, you're able to go back now with all the experience you have to really demonstrate to those people, and we need more of that, and we need to be able to really show that value.
So how can people like Martin and Wavin and the manufacturers help you in that ambition?
I think there's a lot of opportunities in digital innovations. So there's been a lot of talk recently around, IoT, installing sensors and feeding back that data. And it's about balancing the cost of installing those additional sensors with also the value that you get back. But if you've got a client that's visionary and if you've got maybe some internal innovation investment, you can actually work to install sensors into these new products to enable you to monitor them long term.
Martin, is that a challenge which you're, as an industry, rising to, or is it simply the solution for you is to focus on dumb drainage?
Certainly our technology centre over in Holland, where most of our innovation comes from, have looked at embedded sensors, they've looked at intelligent pipes, things like intelligent gullies that are capable of measuring flow, sending a signal for help when they need maintenance. It's certainly in our innovation pipeline. But I think demand drives innovation, and if the industry is coming to the manufacturers and saying, it would be great if you could design this for us, we as manufacturers can then go away. Obviously we have to do some work because we can't develop a one-off product, and for a product there has to be some longevity about it. But if we know there's a demand there, then I think all companies in drainage have got an innovation centre that will look at that.
Do you agree with what Ian was saying, that if you design it right, a sustainable green solution is more likely to be maintained than a culvert in the ground?
Yes, because I think there's a case of, I think it's well known, it's out of sight, out of mind, and the moment you start burying things in the ground, we don't look at them. And a standard road gull is a good example. I think most councils have a once every 2 year cleaning policy around them, something like that. See, Ian? Or when they block, rather than maybe maintain them more intelligent, which would give you more. If a gully sent a cry out that it needed some help, and then the maintenance team could be scheduled to deal with that, rather than just sort of cyclical maintenance, which traditional drainage. It's how we maintain it. We go and jet, we go and clean, we go and wash.
So the Siren work you did recently did make quite a lot of points around this area of knowledge, and whether the industry's got the knowledge and capability to properly embrace a new sustainable future of drainage. What needs to happen to actually accelerate that knowledge transfer?
Well, I think the most recent thing we've done has been involved in writing the SUDS construction guidance, and it was really exactly for that reason, because although there has been guidance in the past from Syria, really everything's moved on massively since that time, and that document really looks at all of the problems that arise on site and to actually talk people through the process to understand it. Because when we did the document, the first thing we did was survey the industry to see what problems arose, and it was the same old thing, commonly happening in terms of people not dealing with cut and fill properly, levels on sites not addressing them, and actually making it very difficult to implement the schemes. But the most important thing, I think, was quite often that there are, for so many people, they're still building their first or their second SUD scheme and actually not really fully understanding the beast that they're trying to build. So this sharing of knowledge and demonstrating what can go wrong, enabling people to understand what getting it right looks like, so that we don't have problems of failures or things not being implemented properly. So I think there's a lot out there that can now help them.
We have got we've got the Siren guides, we've got the Syria guides, we've got the ICE SUDS route maps. I mean, how is there something we're missing in terms of getting those messages across to the design community?
There's two sides to it. I think it's both the design community and it's the construction side, because you've got to have both of those things working together. We've got to have competent drawings that work all the way through the system, and quite often designers are ditched at the outline stage and it goes to some sort of design and build mechanism. So then we've got a problem of understanding there, because again the civil engineering industry is only embracing this quite slowly. So it's at all points in the system, and it's about it just there being more of it and happening more.
But it's about the industry embracing and the clients embracing outcomes rather than I suppose the outputs, the costs of input. I mean, so Sue, from the work you've done, give us some example. I mean, who is doing it right? I mean, we can go to Ian and talk about Wales, but around the world, around the UK, who is doing it right?
Actually, there's some great examples all around the country. I mean, yes, in Cardiff we're doing some great work there. London's got some great work in the boroughs, Hammersmith and Fulham and Greenwich and various places like that, even in the City of London. Cambridge have been doing some fantastic stuff for years. Manchester, Sheffield, Birmingham, Newcastle, Glasgow, they've got a whole new plan there. And they are doing good work. But if you look at the whole of what's going down, it's still quite a small part of it.
Right.
So it is just about us embracing this and moving it forward in the right way, and not being diverted down the route of doing this half-baked approach and then implementing it in an equally half-baked way, and actually it not delivering what it could and it should, because all that does is devalue what we're trying to achieve, when actually we're trying to inspire people with creating a better environment.
Because Martin, presumably you still got a lot of customers coming to you who just are interested in the cheapest solution.
Yeah, obviously, yeah. Housing developers are.
So how do you get your customers to think bigger, think about outcomes, spend more money with you?
I'm not sure it's our role as a manufacturer to change the customer's perception. I think it needs to be driven from the planning of the project to make sure that SUDS is embedded right through. Our role in supply chain is to service that requirement as the engineer or the architect has designed within the development.
So yeah.
Just one point to make, a really important one, is that actually in the commercial world, there's no problem. We do it all the time. If we're doing schools and hospitals and those sorts of projects, we're doing it all the time. It's everywhere. The only place it isn't everywhere in the way that we're talking about is, generally speaking, in housing. And there are some very good housing developers doing it, and there are those who really don't want to know.
Okay, so when a housing developer is doing it well, I mean, what drives them to do it better? Sue?
I think there are those who actually have the understanding that what integrated water management and integrated design means, and the value it can add to their development. The fact that actually if you start it at the outset and do it at the early master planning stage, it does not cost you more or use up more space because you're integrating the functions, and that they can actually sell their properties much more easily because actually they've got an attractive, healthy environment that people want to live in.
Brittany, that sounds exactly the sort of design philosophy which somebody from BuroHappold would naturally adopt. I mean, what's stopping that kind of design philosophy from happening every day of the week?
In all fairness, I mean, in BuroHappold we push it all the time. Every time we have any sort of development, we go straight down the route of SUDS if it's feasible, which almost all the time it is. I would agree sometimes it gets costed out, which doesn't entirely make sense because I think a lot of the time it is a cheaper solution, but there are perceptions around it. I think also the maintenance issue is perceived as more of a challenge because the development owner doesn't necessarily want to keep pruning their garden. But in reality, I think it is being adopted. We don't do so much residential stuff, so we do a lot of big commercial developments, and there it's quite happily adopted.
But the opportunity, as we see, this government's got a target of 1 million new homes. We heard this week about the ambition to try and get up to 250,000 homes a year. This is a big opportunity for, I suppose, this industry to make a change, to influence this. I mean, how can you as a professional go about making that influence?
That's a really hard question. I think it's about working more with those developers, as Sue said. It's really about talking to them and getting them to understand the value that it adds. And I think that comes back into sharing the lessons learned. They are traditional. I mean, housing developers are very traditional. I've got a friend who works for a housing development, and I won't name who they are, but he has only just got a laptop and they've only just stopped using fax. So I think there are other things they're trying to tackle right now as opposed to SUDS, but it is about helping them catch up, as it were, with the technological developments, and there are some housing developers who are there, and hopefully they will start really pushing these innovations and it won't be a problem.
Ian?
I generally find, because I deal with all the planning apps in Cardiff, so all the housing developers hate me at the moment because Schedule 3 is coming in, and if they don't do the SUDS right, they don't build. As simple as that. And I will have the statutory powers to stop them building. And if the design's rubbish, I will stop them building. What I have managed to do, one or two of them, is to put them in touch with design consultants who actually know what they're doing in terms of drainage design. Far too often I'll come across consultants, frankly, who know how to do a computer model with a certain flooding model that we all use in terms of software, but they've never laid a pipe or understood the hydraulics of it. Now that's a problem for me as an engineer and as dealing with planning applications, if you haven't got a designer who can actually design such. So I can find a designer who can, put him in touch with a developer who wants to build, and I can explain to them, look, if you do it this route, it's going to be much faster, you're going to have green infrastructure when people move in, so your houses are going to sell quicker, and you'll make more of a profit. You'll get your 20% back that you've got to pay back to the banks when you borrow the money to build the houses. If you go down route B, it's going to take you 3 times as long. You're going to have to come up with a ridiculous commuted sum, and you're not going to make your profits. So why not go down that route and make more money, or go down that route and make less money. That route is a SUDS route, that's the traditional route. Which one do you want to do? I've literally pitched it like that to developers. One of them did it that way with a 3,500 development. It went flying through planning, and it's a fantastic design. The other one didn't choose that route, a larger development. It's been held up in planning. And that is an example. I'm not being deliberate about it. They didn't think at the beginning stage, we mentioned earlier, a pre-outlined stage, the green-blue corridor on a large development. SUDS has to be decided or thought about at that stage. If you get it wrong at that stage, you're going to have problems all the way through the design. So if they think about it at the early stage, that's when the design works.
Brittany?
Yeah, I was just going to agree with you there that actually planning can be a really great tool for getting some of this stuff implemented. And a lot of the really challenging sustainability concepts that we get through on some of our big developments are because the EA actually pushes us to do it. And having that stick, as it were, of planning makes a massive difference. And maybe we need to be working more closely with planners to give them the confidence to push clients to really adopt these solutions.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Sue, the nub of this question is all around pragmatism versus policy. I mean, do you think it's possible for these very practical solutions that Ian talks about to be achieved without a very rigid policy background?
I don't think we need a really rigid policy background. I just think that if things like the MPPF actually was positively encouraging rather than sort of negatively holding it back, then actually that would be a massive boost to it. So I don't think it just takes a little bit of a change. Now the only other thing we've got is the government's 25-year environment plan, and there's discussions going on now about how SUDS can be part of that. So, you know, if we can get at least something into that 25-year plan in more detail, that would help. Clearly it's contributing towards sustainable development, and we just need to, you know, try to close those get-out clauses.
But there is a feeling still around the industry, as Ian intimated there, that to embrace something different, to embrace a green solution, a sustainable solution for your drainage, will ultimately cost you more money. I mean, is that a myth? Is that a myth that needs to be busted? I mean, what responsibility has the industry got to bust that myth if necessary?
Well, I think if you want to design something that's super expensive, you're going to do it. You don't have to do it like that. You can choose to design a scheme to illustrate how much it costs. And actually, you know, if I've got clients who want to spend loads of money, I'm sure I can spend it for them doing a gold-plated scheme, but I don't have to. I can actually do something that does what it needs to, looks attractive. And just remember, if we're doing SUDS in the landscape, you're going to spend money on constructing that landscape anyway. So actually, it's only the extra over that you're doing for any engineering as part of that. And you are always going to be doing some engineering, but actually you were going to do some engineering anyway. So, you know, what's the difference? There's been lots and lots of studies done, and they're on the DEFRA websites demonstrating that it is not more expensive.
Martin, do you demonstrate that? Have you got the capability within your team of, I suppose, well, your selection of products to actually identify the costs of these different solutions?
Possibly not, because I think SUDS extends outside what we as traditional drainage manufacturers make. Obviously we have a range of products that are tailored into the SUDS solution, but the bits that we can't analyse are the landscaping, the sort of green infrastructure element of it.
So is that an opportunity for you from the manufacturing sector then?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, we had an innovation workshop, and one of the things that and we deliberately used young engineers so they weren't bounded by the rules. They weren't set with sewage for adoption doesn't let me do that. And one of the things they were very keen on was kind of modularisation of landscaping. Almost, can we make landscape in a factory and deliver it into a site in a way that's quick to build, easy to build? I know Ian spoke about this in rain gardens before, and rain gardens were one of the things that came out, almost an off the back of a truck kind of solution. Off-site manufacturing solutions are clearly a way that the industry's got to be going. Ian, what's your experience on this?
I want to see these products. I've spent 14 months on site coming up with Heath Robinson solutions as a civil engineer because Plan A didn't work, and I've got a product that I can't bend or cut. So I've got to come up with a different solution, and I'm adapting products that aren't designed for what I'm doing, doing such. So I'd love to see it, to do a standard design off the shelf. Yes, if we could do that, then I think you would reassure clients that we can go down a sustainable route, and I think that's going to be part of the solution. I genuinely do. I think in terms of another issue that hasn't been mentioned, in terms of keeping the water on the surface as long as possible, a lot of research has been going on in Llanelli with Welsh Water and the Rainscape work they've been doing there. They spent about 40 million quid doing sustainable drainage, and the figures they've got back off the evapotranspiration from keeping the water on the surface are quite astounding in terms of the amount of water that is removed from the system. Over half the water is disappearing. It's not leaking through the pipes, it's not leaking anywhere else, it's going back up into the atmosphere. And clearly the sun never shines. So, I'm a Swansea boy, I would say that. But the reality is, I think in 10 years' time, when we're needlessly burying, sometimes on site I've got to bury, I can't keep it on the surface. But where we're needlessly burying, I can predict in 10 years' time we're going to be digging it up again and putting it on the surface. Because if you can remove that amount of water by doing sustainable design on the surface, then you've got an engineering and cost solution that is infinitely better than just burying and walking away. And I think that's going to be a significant issue in the next 5 or 10 years in the industry.
Sue?
I just also want to add that let's bear in mind that when we talk about costs, we shouldn't just be talking about the actual physical cost of building something. We really have moved on beyond that in recent years, surely. Let's look at the whole life costs. Let's look at the costs of all of the benefits that you're getting for this in terms of air quality, water quality, health and well-being, mental health, education, everything else that we're talking about. It's not just about a few pounds of cash putting plants in the ground and digging holes. And if you're going to go down the route of natural capital accounting, we know that it absolutely wins hands down on every single count by miles.
But isn't that the problem, Sue, that our society hasn't embraced that way of thinking? Brittany, what do you think? Has the society embraced that way of thinking?
It's happening. It really is happening.
Where?
And particularly from the younger generation, we appreciate so much more than just the capital cost of things. We're looking at the social benefits, the wellness metrics that you can get out of it. And I just totally agree with Sue on that point, that we need to be putting more value on it. And this is where I think post-occupancy evaluations comes in, because you can not just quantify it costs this much and it costs this much to maintain and we've saved this much on discharging. Actually, you can go back and do surveys and say, and we've added loads of benefits to the lives of the people that live here, and you can start to quantify that by doing these long-term assessments.
But Cardiff, Ian, just sorry to pick on Wells again, but Cardiff, you've got your capital budgets, you've got your operational budgets. Those two don't mix. I mean, it's very difficult for the public sector to think in this holistic way, isn't it?
I think you've got to work. Everyone talks about working in partnership, but the project I'm doing at the moment, I'm in partnership with Welsh Water and with Natural Resources Wales, which is just our version of the EA. And they're not just putting their knowledge in, they're putting their money in as well in terms of funding the project. I think when you've got a huge asset management spend the Water Authority has, and Ofwat's leaning on them to be more sustainable, when you've got the powers the local government's got in terms of planning, in terms of highways, in terms of maintenance, if you put the two together, you've got a solution. And at the end of the day, you're dealing with the same customers. The people that live in the city or in the community are the same customers. So when you do work together, you've got the ideas, you've got the money, and you've got the planning. And that's where you have to put these ideas and thoughts together. I think in terms of delivering sustainable drainage in an urban environment, I think we talked about the long-term benefits of green-blue infrastructure. You can put a cost on it. I've done it with my project. It's very hard to explain that to the people that live there. It's taken me 12 months of digging up the streets, laying pipes, putting rain gardens in. Things are starting to grow, and they'll all start being nice to me in about May, June time, when the trees start blooming and the plants start growing. They'll all like me again, because it's going to take that long for people to realise and understand what is a very difficult technical thing to explain to people and what you're trying to achieve. And once, I think, you have to allow such systems to settle in and mature, and if they're maintainable, that's how you sell them. You can take people back. We're doing a lot of research on this project. We've got 104 rain gardens going in, and we're doing the before and after research on the community with the university to say, look, what's your change of attitude of this community after the work is done? And I'm hoping that when people come back and realise what we tried to achieve, you see the greater benefit of having green-blue infrastructure put in the community. And I think, on a final point, one part of my department goes around hating street trees and chopping them down because of a maintenance nightmare. And I'm the other side. I'm called a tree hugger by that lot because I go around planting trees. But I design engineering trees that have got root control zones, that have got a certain canopy, they've got a certain design. You can design the tree to be a size and a shape and a colour in an urban environment. And I think if we're going to take SUD seriously, we have to take people and communities' views seriously on what they want in their community. And I've got 12 streets I'm engineering. Every street is different because every street wanted something different. So I think we have to design and engineer green infrastructure into an urban environment, recognising that many people see urban trees as a problem, not as an asset. We have to change people's attitudes to green infrastructure in an urban environment in order to win these arguments.
And Brittany, as the IC's superhero for water, I mean, presumably that's one of your key tasks, is to get that message across around the value of the infrastructure that's being built.
Yeah, definitely, and I think that is that's coming through slowly, and I think the more that these sorts of schemes get put into place, the more that people will start to understand that sort of value coming through.
But the reality is that drainage isn't high on the public's agenda. Water isn't high. It is until it floods. It is until the water starts going out of your taps. But in general, it isn't high on people's agenda. I mean, that is the issue.
No, you're completely right. It's not always high on people's agenda, although it is at times. And I think one of the challenges is what you talked about earlier, is the fact that our funding and our strategies are quite often siloed in the way that we're allowed to allocate funds. And I'm hoping actually that this is one of the things that the Sustainable Development Goals can really help us to overcome. Because although the Sustainable Development Goals break things down into 17 target areas, they are meant to be seen holistically, and they're meant to be seen as to be able to find synergies between them so that you can actually add value. And that's what we need to start thinking about with our funding. So although these SUDS systems may not be viewed too favourably in terms of drainage, because no one cares about drainage, but they might be seen more favourably in terms of creating this beautiful environment and creating a wellness about a place. And actually, if we're able to demonstrate that value, and if we're able to think more holistically, not in these silos as the way that we're funded, and I think the government is moving towards trying not to silo stuff as much, particularly under the Sustainable Development Goals, then we have so much opportunity to demonstrate that added value and to bring added value to people.
Because Sue, I suppose, to what extent are you still seen in the landscape profession as a cost that gets added on at the end to try to make things look a bit better?
Well, not by any intelligent client, no.
But not all clients are intelligent. I mean, is that the issue? Is there a campaign? Is there some work to do to try to influence clients and try to get that message across that it's not just about making things look nice?
I think, if you're put in front of a client to have those discussions, it's not a difficult argument or discussion to have. I suppose from our point of view, clearly there's plenty of projects that happen without much input from any professional. So, and actually I think that professionals work so much more collaboratively. If we get introduced to a project, we're going to be wanting to introduce engineers to perhaps do modelling, FRAs and the engineering calculations and designs. Similarly, architects will request that we're involved for master planning projects. It's a two-way street. I think as professions we can and should and do support each other and understand that actually this is about collaborative team working, particularly on bigger projects, and we actually need the whole design team to be putting their weight, playing their part, and actually you're doing it as a group working together and each expressing what needs to be done from your different perspectives and having that conversation. That's what's so great about designing construction now. That really is happening.
Martin, what do you think?
Let's face it, drainage is not exciting when it's below the ground. But I think the move to sustainable drainage does bring it into the realm of the man in the street that has never thought about where the water goes when their taps are running. My kids leave the tap running every day when they clean their teeth. It drives me to distraction, the waste of water and the resource. but by moving the drainage above ground, it does embed it into society, and I think society will start to understand it and start to care about it.
So can you need to sex your products up a bit more than Martin?
Yeah.
Has anyone got any questions they want to put directly to the panel? But while we're here, any comments, any points they want to make? I've got a wandering microphone. They can stick it on your nose. Surely there must be some point that someone wants to make. Are there any house builders here, by the way? No? Any house builders? No one wants to admit to it. Okay. Ian, having listened to this, because if there are no questions, I'm just going to go and thrust it under someone's nose. Be warned. No, but Ian, do you think that there's enough practical training in the profession going on right now? 27 years you've been in the industry. Do you think that the profession, the likes of CIWEM, ICE, the Landscape Institute, do you think they need to be doing more to teach young professionals about new ways of creating holistic solutions to problems?
I think there's a massive shortage of understanding of drainage engineering in the industry at the moment. I think that's across the board. I think I'd like to see universities and colleges making it a bigger part of the curriculum. I think that's important. I think it's beyond our industry. We have to go to the clients, to the planners, to the urban designers. We have to go outside our area, outside our comfort zone to sell SUDs, because one of those elements could stop us doing what we need to do. If a planner decides they don't like what we're proposing, that could be a spanner in the works in terms of development. So it's about selling SUDs to the wider industry, not just our own. I think CIWEM and IC are doing a lot, and I welcome it. And there's a lot of similar messaging coming back from the industry. But I think we need to recognise there's a lack of drainage design knowledge, a severe shortage. Learning how to use micro drainage doesn't make you a drainage designer. And also, we need to push the SUDS message beyond our bubble to the public, using social media, going to planners, going to clients, going back to planners to remind them. It really is a constant messaging. Because certainly in local government, you've lost a whole tier of expertise because they've all gone because of the cuts. You need to bring the new generation in on the back of this design, and there's a real potential and opportunity to do it. That's the way we have to look at it. There's a real opportunity now, but it has to go beyond our bubble of engineering. It has to go wider, because if you want to win SUDS over, you've got to win politicians, you've got to win local authorities, you've got to win clients, you've got to win planners, you've got to win the lot over, and that's when it's going to happen.
So, what about this knowledge gap? For you, do you agree that there is this knowledge gap that we need to start actively trying to close?
I think it really depends on which of the professions you're working in. I know that in the landscape profession, pretty much all the courses do run modules in SUDS, and I've been very proactive in our own profession in running training courses for experienced professionals. So I think the landscape profession is responding. I think that perhaps the most important thing with some of the other professions is that they understand what it needs. They don't have to be SUDS designers themselves. What they have to do is have an understanding and appreciation of how it needs to be integrated into the design of what's happening and the potential ways of doing that. Then the professionals on the team who do have that expertise can do it. So, but I agree, in engineering and in highways engineering in particular, it really there's a way to go. There's a big way to go.
Brittany, Ian says knowing how to use micro drainage and other modelling packages are available, but knowing how to use those doesn't necessarily make you a drainage expert or an expert in sustainable drainage. Isn't that one of the big problems we're up against, that because so much of this industry is driven by modelling, computer modelling, we're losing touch with what's going on in the real world?
I don't think so. I think modelling and all of the digital software and infrastructure that we use is there to enhance what we do. It's not to replace it. And I certainly know, well, within BuroHappold and also from studying at Bristol, they push you to understand the raw fundamentals before you even get on the modelling machine. So it's a matter of approach. I think we definitely should be focusing on understanding those basics, but as Sue said, you can't be an expert in everything, and we do have specialists in SUDS. When you study at university, you do as a civil engineer, you do structures, water, geotechnics, you cover everything, and it's about having that appreciation of when it's appropriate, and that's what perhaps we need to get a little bit more of. But no, I don't think modelling's going to dumb us down.
But one of the issues, I mean, it was touched on by Ian earlier, but this issue of rather than the strategy for drainage being embraced by the planners and by the designers, it's shunted off at the last minute for drainage engineers to sort out when it's too late to really influence.
It's about awareness of the opportunities, and the more that we use the SUDS drainage systems, the more people will see it and go, we should probably implement that here. And it's about knowledge sharing. It's really what it comes down to. We have the technology there. We know that it works. We just need to talk about it more. And the more we talk about it, the more clients will ask for it, the more planners will push for it because they'll know that it's good, and the more that we can implement it.
Sue?
Actually, taking us back to where we started, planning and pragmatism, I think an area where we really do need to do some work is with our planning colleagues, because actually, despite the fact that we have plenty of authorities with supplementary planning documents and planning policies around flooding and drainage, too many of them don't really understand what a good SUDS scheme looks like. So the fact that a scheme might say it's got SUDS in it, I don't think that they have, and it's not surprising, and I'm not blaming them at all, but if they're looking at something and it says it's got SUDS in it, they have to have good knowledge of what it could be to actually review whether or not from an integrated point of view it works. Clearly they're going to be sending it off to the lead local flood authority to get the comments on does it work, has it got capacity, can it be maintained. But those are very different answers to questions about is it an inherently good integrated multifunctional SUD scheme. And the problem is in the planning system is people coming forward with schemes which do the job, but actually in the context of what we're talking about of quality development, absolutely don't do the job.
Well, Martin, do you think that from your perspective as a manufacturer, getting engaged a lot earlier in the design process, in the planning process, would help you to get, to provide better solutions?
Oh yeah, definitely.
I mean, how do you make that happen?
Well, I think we have a responsibility to go and talk to engineers at the design point of the scheme, and we've worked very hard on that over the last 18 months in restructuring our sales force to get people into engineers to talk about what they're working on and what problems they have. If we don't talk to the engineers early on, we can't identify the opportunities, and it's part of that innovation cycle again, this customer-centric innovation, not us innovating for the sake of innovating, but actually sitting down, talking to customers in the field, hearing them say, I've got a problem with this, and then we can make that innovation around that problem and solve that particular
So what kind of, opportunity for a 30-second plug, but what kind of conversations can people have over your stand, for instance, around this issue?
Well, today we're talking, obviously we've got our main future of drainage stand, and from there we're really interested in people coming and telling us their thoughts on the future of drainage and any problems that they have on site and things that there's no off-the-shelf solution for them. Come and tell us and we can talk about it and we can see if there's something that we already have. And then obviously we've got our existing product set on our smaller stand over to the left.
Well, we've got 5 minutes left, so just to round things off, pragmatism versus policy. I mean, Martin, what for you does a successful drainage future look like for the UK? I mean, give us some ideas about what in your mind is the kind of the success all about.
Okay, well, I don't think successful drainage in the future is no floods. I think we have to accept that if you're going to build a house on a floodplain, the clue's in the name, it's going to flood. But a successful future of drainage is a holistic drainage system that's embedded within the community, where it's part of the community, it betters the community, and the community engage in it and understand why it's there, and through their engagement make the drainage system work, which will mitigate the floods further downstream, not stop them.
That doesn't mean burying everything,
No, I don't think the future is everything buried. No, I think we're moving away from just burying things. Certainly from a materials point of view, we're seeing that. We're seeing a change in the way our geocell tanks are designed, from one big tank in the corner somewhere to smaller tanks serving different purposes around the site. We're seeing changes in the way pipe design is being done. Obviously, Sewers for Adoption 8 will be coming out soon. That will include some elements, although not some of the big ones. Where I noticed permeable pavements were excluded. But I think the change is happening, and the tools are there for people to make the change. And the point of pragmatism rather than policy is, I think, in the absence of Schedule 3 becoming statutory in England, I know it is in Wales, but in the absence of there being something in statute, we as an industry have a responsibility to address it ourselves and say, look, because this government isn't going to invoke Schedule 3, the reality is probably the next one won't. And in the answer to that, we've got to take our responsibility on our shoulders as an industry, as material manufacturers, as SUDS designers, as housing developers, as commercial developers, and say, okay, you're not telling us we've got to do it legally, but we're going to do it anyway.
Ian, in Wales, you are embracing Schedule 3. I mean, what for you is a successful drainage future?
I think we talked at the start of the conversation about plastic bag recycling and how that legislation's worked really, really well there. They actually brought it in about 3 or 4 years ago in Wales. They pioneered it there, and I think England saw, well, it works there, we could tweak it to make it work for England. I'm hoping Schedule 3 is going to do that for England as well, so we can try and make it work in Wales. It's going to be a bumpy first 12 months. But I think when you're engineering water in an urban or rural environment, it's not a threat, it's an asset. You know, the threats from the watercourse, from the River Thames, from the tide, from groundwater in places like London, there should be no threat from engineered water. It can only be an asset because you're controlling the flow, you're controlling the pollution removal, you can design it to look pretty, you can oxygenate it, you can desilt it. It's 100% asset, 0% threat if it's engineered and designed properly. We have to sell sustainable drainage as an asset and not as a threat, and that's when we'll start winning the arguments.
Okay. So what about yourself? What for you as a landscape professional, what does successful drainage future look like to you?
Actually, I'm going to cheat. And what I want is for all engineers and highways engineers to share Martin's vision of a holistic approach to SUDS, because frankly, that would be amazing.
Right. But of course, we've got an awful lot of documentation, we've got an awful lot of manuals, got an awful lot of documentation and advice. I mean, that presumably you want to see it used, do you?
That's what it's there for. Absolutely, that's what it's there for. And I hope if anybody hasn't had a look at the SUDS construction guidance, please go onto the Susdrain website, Syria Susdrain website. It's free to download. It's really simple and easy, lots of pictures, not many words, and you've got no excuse for getting it wrong.
There you go. Brittany, I'm going to give the final word to you, given as you kicked us off. I mean, what does, you talked about the Sustainable Development Goals, what does a successful drainage future in the UK look like to you, and what's stopping it?
I'm going to agree with these guys again, and actually, particularly your point about community engagement in SUDS, and actually on goal 6, I think it's 6A, is talking about in community engagement in our water in general, whether that is access to drinking water, sanitation, or our drainage and flooding. We really need to engage people in it so they understand that value. Like we were saying right at the beginning, we really struggle to value water, and only if we can engage people in that discussion and get them to really appreciate that it's an asset, it's not a threat, it's something beautiful and amazing that we rely on to live. That's really where we need to go. The future of sustainable drainage should really be about a conversation with people about how it can work for them. And the barriers to achieving that, we're not talking enough. We need to go out and chat to people and really share our experiences. And I think looking more at monitoring post-occupancy evaluations, really understanding the impact that these systems have and talking about it is really what's going to make that difference.
And it's the 200th anniversary of the ICE. Are you the new Bazalgette?
Am I the next Bazalgette? Good Lord, that would be quite a pair of shoes to fill. I don't know, we'll see, won't we? Give me 100 years.
In your role as Wonder Woman for water, I mean, what can we expect from the ICE in terms of trying to actually make this debate come to life?
know what, I'm going to fob it off and I'm going to say engineering is about teamwork. So me on my own, I'm not going to be doing anything crazy, hopefully, but I am working really closely with the ICE to have these conversations, to build the awareness, and to try and get people working together from all around the world. I mean, the conference in October, the Global Congress, that's about bringing people together to have that conversation, to tackle the challenges that we face every day. So on my own, nothing. I'm completely useless. But as the wider team in the ICE, I think you can see a fantastic leadership coming through, and that's really what we're trying to give you guys.
Thank you very much, Brittany. Thank you very much. I hope that panel has given you a really good idea of future drainage, policy versus pragmatism. I think we probably agree there's a bit of both. There's quite a lot of both going in. There's a lot of knowledge to really try to impart, and a lot of really good examples of success. But I think really there's a huge opportunity, particularly as we start to continue to expand the housing stock in this country, really continue to build some really important infrastructure for the drainage profession, to take this opportunity to do something a bit different. As Sue and the whole panel has said, there are some really great solutions there ready for this industry to embrace. It's a question of getting on with it. So thank you very much. A round of applause to Brittany, to Ian, to Sue and to Martin for sharing their thoughts. Round of applause. Thank you very much. I believe I'm going to hand over now to another speaker, but they'll be here in a minute's time. So I hope you enjoyed that panel session to kick you off at ecobuild. Go and have a chat to the people at ICE, go and have a chat to people at Wavin, and make sure you know about all these fantastic documents that are around sustainable drainage. Thanks for joining us.